بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Yesterday we spoke a little bit about these two hadith of Imam Rida alayhi salam concerning the first of Muharram and then his conversation with Ar-Rayyan ibn Shabib regarding some of the significant aspects of the commemoration of Muharram during these first 10 days. Today I want to speak and begin this topic of misguidance, causes and cures. I think the relevance or the importance of the topic should be obvious, but to make sure that it is obvious, we are after guidance. We're seeking guidance constantly. We're searching for that guidance, but we know that there are obstacles that lie in our path. There are internal, external forces at play that constantly pose a challenge to our ability to seek and remain with guidance. And if we are able to understand what those things are, understand the mechanics of how guidance works and how misguidance occurs, then we will be better equipped to understand what's happening around us, understand the ups and downs in our life, just the different dynamics that occur that cause us to have spiritual highs at times and then to sometimes take a turn for the worst. And if we're able to understand all of that, then we can better resist those forces and maintain hopefully a more constant course towards more and more guidance. Before we speak about misguidance, I want to focus a little bit on guidance itself and how guidance works. I'm going to introduce you to a couple of vocabulary words and concepts that I think will be important in helping us to understand what misguidance is. So when we think about guidance, usually the first thing that comes to our mind is what we call instructional guidance. The guidance in the form of scripture and prophets and imams. Right? This kind of external guidance that comes to us, instructions on what is reality, what exists, what is God and how is He, and afterlife and heaven and hell, and these kinds of belief-related instructions. And then commandments of what we should do and should not do, and what are the goals of life, and how should we live our life, and these kinds of things. So this guidance that comes to us, that's usually what we think of when we think of as guidance. Our ulama put the term, this is the vocabulary to learn for today, the term that's used to refer to this kind of instructional guidance is hidayah tashri'iyah. Right? It's instructional guidance. Tashri' doesn't necessarily mean only legal guidance, but it's guidance related to religious knowledge, whether it has to do with beliefs and what reality is, whether it has to do with commandments and how we must and must not live our lives. So this is one kind of guidance that Allah provides for us, and it's a broadcast guidance. Right? Broadcast, maybe that word doesn't mean anything anymore. Wi-Fi guidance, right? General guidance is out there. It's there for everyone to access. Any person can access the Quran. Any person can access the teachings of the Prophet. Right? This isn't something that's exclusive to a particular group or a particular kind of person. Everyone has access to that kind of instructional guidance. Not everyone avails himself of it, right? But it's there for the taking. Another kind of guidance that also exists, which we may not think of as guidance. When we think of guidance, we think of those first things, the books and the prophets and those kinds of instructions that are being given to us. But there's another kind of guidance that's also there, and it's also a very important part of how Allah guides us. In the vocabulary of our ulama, it's called hidayah takwiniyah. Right? We'll call it creational guidance. This is a kind of guidance that's programmed into the fabric of how things are created. Think of let's think of some obvious examples of this. When we think of living organisms, not human beings, but animals, for instance, insects. Nowadays, with our scientific knowledge and terminology, we might refer to the guidance that's given to animals as instinct. Right? We'll say that instinctually, this animal knows how to forage for this particular kind of food that's beneficial for it. Instinctually, it knows how to build its home, its nest, its lair, whatever it needs. So they're instincts that are programmed into the animal. Many times they don't have to learn these things, right? There's creatures that eggs are laid and the parents leave and those eggs hatch and the animal is born knowing exactly what to do. There's no opportunity for teaching to occur. But they know what to do, right? So science, a godless science, refers to that as instinct, that is genetically programmed into it. Islamically, we know that the reality is that Allah has taught those creatures what to do. How that happens, we're not clear about. Whether it's programmed into the genetics, even if that's the case, that's still Allah who's created it like that to know exactly what to do. If it's through some sort of nurture of the parents, then again, Allah is the one who's created the system for them to do that. And so it's all divine guidance for those creatures, but it's not in the way of prophets being sent and books being sent and instruction being given to those creatures. They know what to do and it's programmed within them. Right, the Quran refers to this when it talks about the honeybee. In Surah An-Nahl, Allah tells us, وَإِذَا أَوْحَى رَبُّكَ إِلَى النَّحْلِ أَنِ اتَّخِذِي مِنَ الْجِبَالِ بُيُوتًا وَمِنَ الشَّجَرِ وَمِمَّا يَعْرِشُونَ. Right, it refers to the communication that Allah gives the honeybee as wahi. The same term that we use for revelation, the wahi that comes down to the Prophet. Wahi means communication that is conveyed in a non-conventional sense, in a secretive sense, or kind of almost like symbols and those kinds of things. You whisper or kind of in a roundabout way communicate something to someone, that's called wahi. So Allah says that He has communicated to the honeybee to take its home, to make its home out of mountains, within the mountains and in trees, and in these hives that people create for them. And then He commands it, ثُمَّ كُلِي مِن كُلِّ الثَّمَرَاتِ فَاسْلُكِي سُبُلَ رَبِّكِ ذُلُلًا. And then eat of all the flowers and the forage that you find, and travel these paths that Allah has commanded for you. Right? Now we start to understand a little bit about the complexity of how these honeybees work and how they go out to forage and how they're able to find their hive with extreme precision in ways that we can't even fathom. Right? They're able to go out up to 7 miles and then find their way back through thick and thin, through weather and wind and all these different things, and use landmarks to find their way back. And Allah is saying that all of this is part of the wahi of Allah, the way He's communicated to the honeybee to know what to do. Right? So He uses the term communicate in wahi. We don't know how that happens. It could be through how He's created them genetically or in whatever other way. But the point is that guidance is taking place even for those creatures. This is one example. What we know is that this is actually not specific to honeybees. It's not specific to animals. It's a general kind of guidance. Every single creature of God, whether we call it alive or inanimate, whether it's a physical being or on some other plane of existence, every single creature of God is guided in this way. Right? One verse that tells us about this is a conversation that happens between Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun. Right? In Surah Taha, when it tells us the story of Musa and Harun going to, did I say Fir'aun? I can't remember if I said Fir'aun or Harun. So Fir'aun and Musa. But one of the stories that's given to us is that when Musa and Harun, the two brothers, go into Pharaoh's court and declare who they are and what their purpose is, Fir'aun turns around and asks, who is this Lord of yours? You're saying you're coming on behalf of Rabbul Alameen. What is this Rabbul Alameen of yours? And Musa introduces Allah as Rabbuna alladhi a'ta kulla shay'in khalqahu thumma hada. Right, so our Lord, the one that we're coming on behalf of, is the one who created everything, gave everything its existence and its creation, and then guided everything. Right? This is where He's referring to the creation of everything, not just human beings, not just sentient beings, not just animals and organisms that we call alive, but every single thing that Allah has created. Allah is first of all the one who has created everything, and then He's the one who has guided everything as well. And we know that guidance doesn't take the form of instruction. He doesn't send prophets to the rocks and the mountains and the trees, but they are guided nonetheless. How they are guided, the how is not so important, but the fact that they are guided is that they are given all of the qualities, the properties that they require to do their job, to fulfill their function in God's creation. Right? So that water has to have those particular qualities to be able to fulfill all of the roles that it has to fulfill, to be the substance the life substance of all living things. It has to have certain qualities. Those qualities are given by Allah. That giving of properties that are suited for water to fulfill its place and purpose in creation, that's termed as guidance. Right? So this kind of guidance is known, again, the vocabulary word was hidayah takwiniya. It's a creational guidance programmed into the fabric of how things are created. And this is also general. Every single creature of God has this kind of guidance that's provided to it. One important example of this hidayah takwiniya, this creational guidance, is found within us as humans. Right? It's known as the fitrah. The fitrah is the way Allah has created us so that we have an innate, almost instinctual recognition of God. And he refers to this in a verse in the Quran. The address of this verse is very easy. It's 30:30. Surah Ar-Rum, which is surah number 30 and verse number 30. Allah says, فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا لَا تَبْدِيلَ لِخَلْقِ اللَّهِ ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. So the first sentence tells us that we are commanded to turn ourselves over or kind of focus our attention exclusively on the religion of Allah. Right? This is a reference to that first kind of guidance that I mentioned, the hidayah tashri'iyah. Right? Allah has given us this guidance in the form of scripture, in the form of the Prophet and his teachings, the form of the Ahlul Bayt. This is guidance, external guidance that's coming to us. He says, devote yourself to this guidance that's being given to you. If you do this, then he says that you will be adhering to this fitrah that you have within yourself. This fitrat Allah allati fatara an-nasa alayha. The term fitra, fatara it's similar to khalaqa. Khalaqa means to create. So there's several words that are used, khalq and fitra and insha and bar, and there's various terms that are used in the Quran, taswir, that are used for different aspects of creation. Fatara has the similar meaning to fajara that I mentioned yesterday, to tear something apart, to rip something apart. Infitar, Surah Al-Infitar is about the tearing apart of the sky. So if you think of non-existence as kind of blackness and darkness, there's nothingness, and then when something's created, it's like it's ripping through this blackness of non-existence and coming into existence. Maybe there's some connection like that linguistically. But fitra is, that form in Arabic is a reference to the particular way in which Allah has created us. The manner of creation is referred to as fitra. So the fitratullah that he talks about is this way in which Allah has created us. We can refer to it as like an innate recognition of God, an innate cognition of God. Every human being, every thinking human being, everyone who has a mind, has built in, programmed within him or her, this knowledge that God exists, a connection to the Creator. Right? Whether we recognize it or not, that's a different question, but it's there within all of us, instinctually, innately. All right? So by adhering to the tashri'i guidance, the external guidance and the instructional guidance that God has given us, we are thereby adhering to this innate recognition that God has created all human beings with, التي فطر الناس عليها, which is unchanging and cannot be changed. لا تبديل لخلق الله. You can't delete this. You can't change this recognition and omit this recognition from within you. You can ignore it. You can pretend that it doesn't exist. You can deny that God exists. You can do all of that. We have the power to choose to override that cognition that we have. But if we are in touch with that, if we're not corrupted by external forces that have deluded us into thinking that there is no God, then we would be in tune with this instinctual recognition that there is in fact a God. All right, so this second part of the verse is referring to this creational takwini guidance that's within us, with which Allah has created all human beings. And if we answer the call to the Prophet's guidance, then we are in fact also answering the call of our internal guidance, which Allah has programmed within us. And these two are built to be complete complements, complement with an E, complements of one another. Right? So everything that's in the Sharia and everything that's in the teachings that are received through the divine guides is perfectly in sync and perfectly compatible with our own instinctual urges and inclinations towards what is godly, towards what is good, to be attracted towards what is perfect and what is beneficial. Right? So these are two aspects of guidance that we have, and both of these are general, are universal. All creatures have this takwini guidance appropriate to whatever it is. Of course, a rock's fitra is going to be different from a human being's fitra. Its purpose in the cosmos is different, and so the level of guidance that it's given is going to be very different to what a human being is given. A third kind of guidance, a third vocabulary, is that there is another kind of takwini guidance that Allah gives us. This we usually refer to as tawfiq. Right? We say, may Allah give you tawfiq to do something. This tawfiq is another kind of guidance. Right? Tawfiq actually means to bring things together, to facilitate something, to bring all the causes and all the means together so that something can happen successfully. Right? Think of whatever all the work and the time and the arrangements that had to go in to make this majlis possible. Right? So the process of bringing all those ingredients, all the organization, all the ideas, all that together and bringing it together is called tawfiq, to bring those things together so that you end up with a product that works and that's successful. So this third kind of guidance is a particular guidance that's only offered to some. It's not like the other ones. The other one is general. Fitratullah allati fatara nasa alayha was something that every human being has. Muslim or not Muslim, theist or atheist, every single human being has that guidance within them. Whether they accept it or not, or listen to it or not, that's a different question. But they all have it. This third kind of guidance is also hidayah takwini. It's a creational guidance, but it's only there for those who respond favorably to the other forms of guidance. So I mentioned that the first kind of guidance is broadcast. Everyone has access to the Quran, right? Everyone has access to the Prophet's teachings. It's not particularly for one group or another group. But only some people listen, right? That Wi-Fi example or broadcast back in the day of radio example is very appropriate for this, right? It's broadcast. It's Wi-Fi is there. The waves of Wi-Fi are all around us, but to be able to access it, you have to make certain efforts. You have to have a certain device. You have to have a certain codes and things like that. Only then can you tap in to those waves of information that are all around us, right? So the broadcast instruction that's given to us in the form of guidance, it's there for everyone. But if I turn an ear of acceptance to it, if I listen to it, if I accept it, if I start to act on it, then Allah kicks in another level of guidance called tawfiq, where He now starts to open up doors for me. He guides me towards beneficial people, beneficial conversations, beneficial books. He rewards my efforts with small prizes here and there in my life where I find joy in something, and through that joy He guides me towards more and more opportunity. He rewards my efforts with success and with happiness, right? And so in these ways He facilitates things and makes me successful because I've made an effort to answer the call of my fitrah within me, to accept the guidance that's being given to me. And so then He will fortify those efforts and help me down that path so that I'm given more and more opportunities to advance myself. Not always positive. Sometimes guidance takes on the form of a bala as well, a hardship. So we shouldn't think that once you take the right steps and take the steps towards guidance that everything else is happiness and ease. That's definitely not the case. And look at the awliya of Allah. Look at Imam Hussein, whose shahada we're commemorating. Think of the hardship that he faced. This was not a punishment for Imam Hussein, that he did something wrong, so now Allah is subjecting him to all this punishment. This is opportunity for Imam Hussein. Right? The bala for the awliya of Allah, for the friends of Allah, these hardships that they're subjected to are opportunities for them to become closer to Allah, to gain more capacity, to be patient, to be perseverant, to stand up for the truth, despite the fact that everything physically, the pain, the suffering, is all calling them to to quit, to surrender, to sacrifice principle, but they're able to rule over all of those tendencies with their intellect and with this higher calling and answer the call of Allah and sacrifice everything that they have for His sake. Right? In that process of overcoming this hardship, that person has the ability to attain those ranks that only the likes of the Ahlul Bayt have. So this is something about guidance and the way guidance works. We have these three different kinds of guidance. And we're constantly seeking to advance in guidance, but the problem is that there are these obstacles in our way. I'm going to transition now to a hadith that is very helpful in understanding the fact that guidance is not something that we should ever take for granted. Right? On a daily basis, we are reciting this verse in Surah Al-Fatiha, Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Right? We're praying constantly that, oh Allah, guide me to the straight path. And sometimes the question arises, what does that mean? If I'm already Muslim, I'm already a follower of the Ahlul Bayt, am I not guided? Right? This is guidance. Why am I now asking for Allah to guide me to the straight path? Is this not the straight path? The straight path is Islam. The straight path is the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. I accept that. I understand that. What's the need for any more guidance? Should it not be, keep me on the path of guidance? Why am I asking Him to guide me anew? The reality is that we should never take guidance for granted. We shouldn't think that we've already reached. Right? If you reflect on the verse itself, we are asking Allah to guide us to a sirat. Sirat is a path, a road. Right? We're not asking Him to guide us to a destination where you reach and then you say, I'm done. My travel's done. I've now reached. I'm there. We're asking Him to guide us to a path which, by the nature of being a path, goes somewhere. And when you get onto a path, if you're navigating, once you get onto the right road, you don't stop there. That road is supposed to convey you to some destination. If you just stop there in the middle of the road and say, I'm done, now that I'm on course, I can stop, that doesn't make any sense. You get on course so that you can continue your journey and reach your final destination. That's what we're asking Allah to guide us to. Guide us to the path. And like our navigation failure sometimes, we get onto the path, we get onto the right road, but then you're not guaranteed that you're going to stay on that road. Right? Just because you get onto the right course doesn't mean that you're guaranteed that you're going to continue on that course and reach your destination. You could get lost at every turn. There are constantly ways that you can veer off the path and end up being misguided and not reach your destination. So it's necessary for us to constantly ask this prayer that Allah guide us onto this path, keep us on the path. And once I get to the path, and the destination again is not some finite destination that I can get on the path and arrive at the destination and I'm done. The destination of Sirat Mustaqim doesn't end until you're dead. Until you're dead, your ability to leave the path and veer off it is still there. You could be on the path your entire life, and in your last moments, you could renounce everything. You could renounce God. You could become angry at Allah and say, why did you subject me to this or that? We don't know what will happen into those last moments, and we could lose everything, lose our way, and then die without guidance. That possibility is there. There's a hadith in Kitab al-Kafi. This is in the very first book of Kitab al-Kafi, Kitab al-Aqli wal-Jah, the book of intellect and foolishness. Hadith number 12 is a series of exhortations and teachings from Imam Kadhim alayhi salam, our seventh Imam, to one of his companions, Hisham ibn al-Hakam. And in one of those teachings, Imam al-Kadhim says the following. He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ حَكَى عَنْ قَوْمٍ صَالِحِينَ رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا وَهَبْ لَنَا مِن لَّدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْوَهَّابُ حِينَ عَلِمُوا أَنَّ الْقُلُوبَ تَزِيغُ وَتَعُودُ إِلَى عَمَاهَا وَرَدَاهَا. So Imam Kadhim alayhi salam, he tells us that in this dua, which comes at the very beginning of Surah Ali Imran, it's the first page of Surah Ali Imran, the dua that he quotes, he says that Allah actually, when he's quoting it in Ali Imran, he's quoting it from righteous people who recognize the reality of how guidance and misguidance work. And because of that, they say the following prayer. Let me share the supplication, the dua with you. They say, "Oh Allah, don't allow our hearts to veer after you have guided us." Right, so obviously these are people who are already guided. They're already on the right path. They already believe in Allah. But they have the wisdom to recognize that guidance is not something they are entitled to. Being guided is not our prerogative that we can demand it and say, yes, I have it and I am guided and I am saved and everything's guaranteed for me. At no point should we ever have that kind of sense of a guarantee. And these wise people, these righteous wise people, they recognize that guidance is not theirs to keep. It's not their claim. It's something that's granted by God. And just as it's granted by God, it can also be lost. Of course, Allah would not take it away without reason, but I can lose my right to it. I can make decisions, I can turn away, I can become inattentive, I can become neglectful, and I can lose my path. Just because I was guided until today doesn't mean I'll be guided tomorrow. And so because they recognize this about themselves, they make this prayer and say, "Oh Allah, don't allow our hearts to veer after you have guided us." All right? So their recognition is that they recognize that guidance is not intrinsic. It's not something that we own. They recognize that the essential state of the human being is one of unguidedness, like all creatures. We're essentially unguided. And it's only when Allah guides us through those three means that I mentioned. In the way He creates us through our fitrah, He guides us. Through external instruction, He guides us. And then if I take the correct steps and I am responsive to the guidance that He gives me, then He'll give me additional tawfiqat, a personal guidance in so many forms that we don't even recognize sometimes. But He facilitates so many things in our lives so that we progress along this path towards more and more guidance. Even somebody like our Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even he in the Quran is referred to as dal, misguided, unguided. That might come as a surprise. In Surah Al-Duha, right? Allah, in the middle of the surah, He says, "Alam yajidka yatiman fa'awa wa wajadaka dallan fahada." Right? Did Allah not, he begins the surah kind of reassuring the Prophet and reconnecting with him and saying that I'm not angry with you and these kinds of things. And he says, did God not shower you with all these blessings in the past? He found you as an orphan and He gave you protection in the form of your grandfather, in the form of your uncle, in the form of a wife who were able to support you and protect you. And then He says, and did He not find you to be dal, unguided, and then He guided you? So even the Prophet ﷺ, somebody who is the source of our guidance, who is the best of creation, who is at the, deserves the highest levels of paradise and with whom Allah is eternally pleased, even he intrinsically is not guided. All the guidance that he has, and he's the source of guidance for us now, all the guidance that he has is not his, it's guidance that he's been given by Allah. If Allah were to retract that guidance from even the Prophet, then the Prophet would be unguided. He would be dal. He would not know the path. He would not know the way. It's only because Allah has guided him that he has guidance. So if guidance is not intrinsic even to the Prophet, then what hope do we have? What claim do we have to say, I am guided, I am guaranteed, I'm saved, and from now on it's smooth sailing and there's nothing that can happen to me. I'm a Muslim, I'm a Shi'i, I participate in the commemoration of Imam Hussein, smooth sailing from here on out. What right do we have, what claim do we have to think that that's the way things work? Wise people, wiser than us, have recognized that our hearts have the ability and the reality that they will, if left neglected, they will be drawn to this side and that side, and they'll lose their way. And they've felt the need to constantly affirm and constantly beg Allah to keep them on that straight path and not to allow their hearts to swerve this way or that. Sometimes we think of guidance, I think, as something that Allah does, and then that's done. He's cut off from it. Something like creation. I think we have the same misconception sometimes with the way Allah creates. We think of Him, we anthropomorphize, we kind of imagine Him to be like us. You know, if I build something, a person puts this mimbar together, puts the wood together, and then the person might pass away. He might move on to another project, but the mimbar stays. It's been made once, and that's it. Yes, it could get destroyed, it could get broken, those kinds of things, but once it's made, it's done. And the builder doesn't have to continually do something to it to keep it in existence. Sometimes we think of Allah's creation in the same way, that once Allah creates, then that's it. He makes the cosmos, and then He moves on to other things, but now we exist independently. Well, the reality is that we're not independent at all. It's not only that we need Allah to come into existence, and once we exist, then that's it. We don't need Allah anymore to continue to make us exist. And that, yes, He can come along and kill us and take us at one point, but if He turns His attention somewhere else or retracts His will from us, that I would still continue to exist. That's not the case. Our existence is more like, this is projector on this projector. That's us. Right? The source of our existence is this light that's shining there. That projected image doesn't exist independently of the source. Not only when it was first turned on, but if you turn it off now, at any moment if you turn it off, that's gone. It no longer exists. That's us. That's not only us as humans, every aspect of the cosmos, every creature in the cosmos is like that. If Allah, for a second, doesn't will for us to continue to exist, it's not that we would fall over dead. We would actually cease to exist. The entire cosmos and all it seems so solid to us, it seems so permanent to us. Modern atheistic science tells us that conservation of mass and energy, whatever exists, continues to exist and matter cannot be created and destroyed. Energy cannot be created and destroyed. It can only be converted from matter into energy, energy into matter. But once it's there, and there's nothing that can happen to it. That's absolutely not the case. Allah is the one who created it all, and He's the one who can destroy it all. And it's His will that is that energy that's projecting us and our existence. And if that fades for a second, if He turns His attention away from us for a second, then we're doomed. Our guidance is also like that. Just because I've had the tawfiq to find guidance and find the Ahlul Bayt and to even make myself into a good person by the help of Allah until today, doesn't guarantee that tomorrow I'll remain on the path. The Quran gives us all these examples of people who had that kind of guidance, who were at the pinnacle of guidance, and then had very precipitous falls and are now at the pits of hellfire. Foremost is Iblis. Right? Iblis, we'll talk more about him as we talk about the causes of misguidance. Shaitan is one of the main causes of our misguidance, and so we need to understand how he works and exactly what kind of threat does he pose to us. So we'll go into that in more detail in coming days. But from this aspect of Iblis was at the pinnacle of existence. He was a jinn who had ascended the ranks and had earned his place amongst the angels through his own efforts and through his virtue. He wasn't an angel, he was a jinn, but he was counted amongst the angels. That's why sometimes people get confused when Allah tells the angels to bow down to Adam and Iblis refuses to, and people come to the conclusion that, okay, then Iblis must have been one of the angels. Like in Christian theology, he's considered a fallen angel, these kinds of things, but that's not the case. He's a jinn, but he had achieved that virtue through worship. Imam Ali alayhi salam praises him in Nahj al-Balagha for having worshipped Allah and performed a sajda that lasted for 6,000 years. And he says that, I don't know if the 6,000 years is 6,000 of our reckoning or some other reckoning that we can't even fathom. But Iblis had these prolonged acts of worship and devotion, and he had risen in the ranks. But because of this arrogance that he had, because of this feeling that he had towards Adam, which brought him to the point where he refused a simple commandment of Allah, he lost everything. That arrogance that he had, that disobedience that he had, showed that deep within him, actually there was something that was always there, a kernel of unguidedness. And he lost control of that. That took over, that came out, and all the efforts, all the worship, all that he had done for those millennia that we can't even fathom went to naught. And now he's the leader of hell. He's the first one who will burn in hellfire. Not the master of hellfire. Again, like sometimes popular culture portrays the devil as someone who's going to stoke the fire and these horns and pitchforks and these kinds of things. He's actually the one burning in hellfire. The guardians of hellfire are angels, and Malik and his subordinates who will be the managers of hellfire. عليها ملائكة غلاظ شداد لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون. They're these big, hefty angels that will be guardians of hellfire. They'll be the ones to manage and to punish and torture the people who are there. Iblis is one of the ones who's in hellfire. So someone who is at that level of virtue and goodness, how did he end up there? Right? Bal'am ibn Ba'ura is mentioned in Surah Al-A'raf, not by name, but by story. He was someone in the time of Musa alayhi salam who had achieved, again, high ranks to the point where he's known as someone who's mustajab ad-da'wah. Right? We make dua and sometimes we feel like our du'as aren't answered. At least they're not answered the way we want them to be answered. He was someone who was so in sync with Allah's will, so beloved to God, that when he prayed, Allah would answer his prayers. Like the prophets and like the imams, that kind of caliber. And it tells us that he got to the point where he lost his way. Pharaoh tempted him, and he decided to use this kind of gift of his against Musa. The one who was the source of his blessing and his guidance, he turned against him, aligned with Pharaoh, tried to pray to Allah to crush Moses, and as a punishment, Allah takes his gifts away and punishes him. Qarun is another person like this. There's several examples in the Quran of people who achieved great heights of guidance, who thought they were guided and were in fact guided. Not thought, they were in fact very well guided, but it was never guaranteed for them. It was never something that was permanent, and they lost their way and they ended up losing everything and being amongst the most misguided, the leaders of misguidance, a'immatul dalal, right? Leaders of misguidance and the first to go to hell. So this is what we need to understand a little bit better. To first of all be aware of this reality that we have, not to ever feel comfortable and complacent with the guidance that we've, alhamdulillah, been able to achieve until now, to always make sure that we nurture the guidance that we have, that we advance it, that we have the right attitude of humility, that we always feel indebted to Allah, never feel that He is beholden to us, that He now owes us something, but if I'm guided until now, it's only by the grace of God. And I have to continually hold fast to His rope so that my next step also is a step of guidance. My next step is also a step of guidance, because at any moment I could step this way or that. And I could lose my way unless I stay steadfast in my grasp of the divine rope and the rope that He's dangled in the form of the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. These are the only guidance, only guarantees that I have. As long as I stay steadfast with them, then I'm guaranteed. But the question mark remains in how well can I hold steadfast to them? How constant can I be in my devotion to the Quran and my devotion to the Ahlul Bayt? And that's where we have to worry about ourselves and never feel complacent, always feel like we have more to do, we have more work to do, and we need to nurture the belief that we have. I pray to Allah to help us to appreciate what guidance we have achieved until now, to remain humble in our pursuit of more guidance, to resist all of the forces of misguidance that are there, to understand them better, and inshallah to hold fast to the two precious legacies that the Prophet has left behind in the form of the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt, so that we never lose the guidance once we have achieved it. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.